Denny Hamlin sweeps the Darlington Throwback weekend, winning both the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series race. Too bad neither of them count. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric. Welcome to this week's edition of Out of the Groove. Officially the second to last episode before the playoffs. But this is the very last episode before the very last regular season race, in which case several drivers are in a must-win scenario. Literally, that is their only chance. They're just lucky NASCAR has this goofy playoff format that gives them that chance. That's right, Matt DiBenedetto fans, he still has a chance! Anyway, I'll talk about the playoffs and all that more at the end of the show. I got to talk about the Throwback weekend and the stuff coming directly out of that first. So yeah, like I talked about last week, and as you obviously probably saw this weekend, it was the Throwback weekend at Darlington. A big deal. They've done this a few years in a row now. Big hit with the fans, so it seems. Drivers running a bunch of throwback paint schemes, announcers wearing ridiculous costumes, Richard Petty out there leading the field during pace laps. Basically a NASCAR fan's dream. And the race, of course, was good as well. I mean, Darlington's one of the more challenging racetracks. It looks like just a simple oval. It looks really wide, but then when you actually look at where the racing groove is and the changing banking, how close you run to the wall, the way the turns differ from each other, definitely the most challenging oval, possibly even the most challenging racetrack on the overall circuit. Coming into this weekend, I talked about it a little bit on last week's show, I kind of figured we'd see a different mix of people towards the front, like good drivers. I was expecting drivers like Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson to run really well and actually contend for the win, and that really wasn't the case. Instead, the race was dominated by our usual suspects we've seen this year. Martin Truex Jr. led a lot of laps, won the first two stages. Kyle Larson led some laps, Kyle Busch as well. Ultimately, it was Denny Hamlin, one of the up-and-coming JGR Toyotas, getting his second win of the season. And I say up and coming, we've typically considered JGR one of the best teams in NASCAR, but for the first half of this season, they were kind of non-existent. Their cars were at best top 5, top 10, like 7th place cars usually. They didn't get a win until more than halfway into the season. It took them a long time, and we really started to question whether or not JGR was going to be able to contend this year. But I say up and coming because now in the last, I think, 7 or 8 races, they've now won 4 of them thanks to Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. Martin Truex Jr., another Toyota driver affiliated with JGR, continues to be the most consistently dominant car as the season has gone on. So yeah, up-and-coming JGR is peaking at just the right time heading into the playoffs. Looking at some of the more notable finishing results, obviously Denny Hamlin won, Kyle Busch second, so that's JGR 1-2. I want to shout out Kurt Busch, who finished third. Ever since he won the opening Daytona 500 this season, that team's really not been very good, but they look very strong for much of the evening here at Darlington. Kurt Busch said afterwards that they treated this race like a playoff race, and if this shows any good signs for them, then it's a good look for them heading into the playoffs. It means that we might have good things coming from that 41 car. Austin Dillon surprised me, got 4th, and Erik Jones also really impressed me Sunday night, finishing 5th in his first ever Cup Series start at Darlington, a track that's tough for many veterans. A rookie he's only been up to this track a couple of times in lower level series, his first time here in the Cup Series, and he runs top 5, so great run for Erik Jones. He's been on a big-time roll the last few weeks. Just a little too late to make the playoffs. He might win Richmond, though. I'll talk about predictions for that a little bit later on, so keep our eyes peeled for that 77 car. Matt Kenseth was 6th. He's also been on a pretty good roll lately, trying to continue to point his way into the playoffs. Looks like he's in an okay position right now, but we're all saying to Richmond, one of his best tracks that we saw him run really well at early in the season. Matt Kenseth could be knocking on the door for his first win of the season. He's been close lately. Ryan Newman 7th, another consistent finish for that team. Martin Truex Jr. led a lot of laps, won the first 2 stages, and came down to the wire whether or not he could hold off a hard-charging Denny Hamlin. Ultimately, he got into the wall and finished 8th, still an okay result for them. Kevin Harvick was up and down. He was 9th, and Jamie McMurray rounds out the top 10. Another driver like Kenseth trying to point his way, and McMurray's not been running quite as well as Matt Kenseth and Chase Elliott have in recent weeks, his main 2 competitors for those final playoff spots, but if things hold the way they are now, McMurray still looks like he could be in pretty good shape. Chase Elliott did finish 11th, so yeah, not too far behind. Johnson was 12th, the driver who I thought might really start to show up. We know it's getting close to the playoffs. We're used to seeing the 48 run well in the playoffs. They've really not run well in a long time. I was hoping Darlington might be their weekend. Really wasn't, so that's still some question marks on the 48 team. And the last 2 notable finishes, Joey Logano finished 18th, and poor Clint Bowyer finished dead last after having engine issues early on in the race. Those are 2 drivers who've consistently continued to slip further and further and further away from that 16th points position, and they are both now in definite must-win scenarios at Richmond, as they are both now more than 90 points. In fact, in Logano's case, he's more than 100-something points behind 16th place. They're pretty far out of it at this point. So we keep talking about them trying to build momentum, and they have done the exact opposite week week after week. No momentum has been built in either of those teams. So yeah, anyway, that is a basic rundown of the most notable finishers in this race. Denny Hamlin got the win, and unfortunately for Denny Hamlin, I've been talking great about him and JGR so far, how they're up and coming. Yeah, they might have hit quite a roadblock, as was announced just yesterday on Wednesday. Denny Hamlin, your race winner, faces a heavy penalty after they found their rear suspension was not up to code, I suppose. $50,000 fine for that 11 team, loss of 25 points, and their crew chief Mike Wheeler will be out for, I believe, the next 2 races, and that includes the first race of the playoffs. But possibly the most damaging penalty to that team is the fact that this win is encumbered, so the 5 playoff bonus points that come with it will not come with it. And this is a big deal. The last time we saw a race winner in the Cup Series have their win encumbered, it was Joey Logano way back towards earlier in the season, and we've seen how that's come back to really bite that team as they've had no success since then. But things get even worse for Denny Hamlin. Not that much worse, I guess, but if we also look on the Xfinity Series side, Hamlin, like I said at the top of the show, swept the weekend, won both races, both in that cool red flying 11, or I guess flying 18 in the Xfinity Series, but that cool paint scheme, won both races. Unfortunately, his Xfinity team got hit with the exact same penalty his Cup Series team did. Which obviously, I guess for Hamlin, in terms of making the playoffs, that doesn't matter to him. But, in terms of having his pride hurt a little bit, I'm sure that can't feel good for him, or especially not for JGR. But the penalties don't stop there, guys. JGR was not the only team with penalties. It's also worth noting that in the Xfinity Series, second place finisher Joey Logano for Team Penske also had the exact same penalty. So in the Xfinity Series, your top 2 finishers both had severe penalties. That's not a good look for NASCAR. Good thing it doesn't happen too often, because that's rough. And then back on the Cup Series side, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s 88 car was found to have not 1, but 2 lug nuts unsecured at the end of that race. So that means some money suspensions or money fines, and Greg Ives will be out also for, I believe, the next 2 races. Now, Dale Earnhardt Jr. is pretty far out of the playoff picture. He's going to need to win to make it into the playoffs. This is only going to make that more difficult because that team has not shown that much speed really anywhere this season, so their cause has just gotten even more difficult. So that's the news there. But anyway, going back to the penalty, specifically the suspension, the rear bits of the car suspension that Hamlin and I guess Logano's Xfinity team, mainly Hamlin, committed, that is potentially a very big blow, not just to that team specifically, because obviously the loss of those 5 points that they got can't feel very good, but also for Joe Gibbs Racing, because like I said, they have been the most up and coming. They've been riding the most momentum of any other team at NASCAR the last month or 2. Now they've kind of been slapped in the face. And I know a lot of people are going to like to throw out the words cheaters, oh, JGR's cheaters. A lot of people like to hate Toyotas, I've noticed in my time as a racing fan, and I've never quite understood why. But it makes me wonder, since we saw so many of these similar penalties across multiple series, across a couple different teams, it makes me wonder how much the team really had control over the incident. And I say that, I don't want to defend Denny Hamlin. That team, they obviously did something wrong. Not every team had that same issue, so obviously they did something to mess it up. But Darlington's one of the most physical races. It's a track where just about every car gets into the wall a couple of times over the course of the night. And we even saw on Denny Hamlin's burnouts, he kind of looked like he might have grazed the wall slightly during his burnout. At the time, maybe there was eyebrows being raised that, hey, that was him, maybe trying to correct something. But since the penalty wasn't for rear end alignment issues like LIS inspection stuff, which we hear about a lot in the past, it makes me think that really had nothing to do with that. That might have just been purely coincidence. It's also worth noting that NASCAR typically only hardcore inspects, I believe, the top 2 or 3 finishers and maybe one other random car selected, like maybe the 20th place finisher, just a random car. So the fact that let's see, across the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series race, that's like 6 or 7, 8 cars that they inspected, the fact that 3 of them had that penalty, it makes me wonder how many of these other cars that finished deeper in the field maybe had similar issues, but they just did not come up because they didn't finish high enough. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm completely defending the team or anything here. Obviously we've heard about crew chiefs in the past always pushing the envelope, trying to get as much out of their cars, trying to put as much into the cars as they possibly can without causing an infraction. All these cars did pass pre-race inspection, so whatever happened to these rear suspensions, stuff like that, must have occurred during the race. And I just wonder if it was bad luck that they're at a really rough racetrack, and sometimes you hit things you don't mean to, and it messes stuff up, and they just were victims of bad luck, or if they did actually employ something to mess them up. Either way, NASCAR hit them hard with the penalty. It's not going to really heavily affect Denny Hamlin's team. I mean, he's still going to make the playoffs, still going to have a decent amount of bonus points, from his wins and his other win and some stage points earlier this year. So it's not a huge deal in this case, but it is just something to be aware of now that we do begin to start the playoffs and things start to get very serious. Every race now is going to matter. Not just wins, but points are going to matter for all these guys that haven't really had to worry about points for most of this season. So anyway, I don't have a lot more to say about that. Really don't really have an opinion to give. There's not really an opinion-based thing. There's just a point out some facts, and that is it's going to create an interesting storyline. We'll see how JGR, if it hurts their momentum or if they'll continue to come out and dominate, because we're heading to Richmond, which has been a short track, and JGR has been very good at short tracks in recent years. For the sake of this not being a super duper long episode, I'm going to move on now to a quick discussion of the playoff bubble heading into the final regular season race of the season. That's right, guys, we're 26 races in. That doesn't even count like the All-Star race, the Clash, and all the other stuff we had at Daytona this season. This has been months in the making. We've made it. After Darlington, the bubble point standings have not changed that much. 14th place is still Chase Elliott, 15th place is still Matt Kenseth, and 16th place, the final spot in the playoffs right now, is still Jamie McMurray. And the three of them are only separated by 3 points. In 17th is still Clint Bowyer, but after his issues here at Darlington, his engine issues, he's now 91? Yes, 91 points behind Jamie McMurray, so that's way more than one race worth of points. He's got to win. Joey Logano had yet another subpar finish at Darlington, which means he's actually fallen back. Eric Jones, who's riding on a streak of 3 straight top 5 finishes, is now ahead of Logano. He's 18th in points, still way too far behind the 16th place drivers to be able to do anything. He's also going to have to win, but like I said earlier, Eric Jones, 3 straight top 5 finishes at 3 very different type of racetracks. That team might have finally found something that the 78s had all year. So anyway, heading into Richmond, this is a track where Joey Logano's had success at in the past, Matt Kenseth has had success at in the past. All these drivers, I don't feel like this track really heavily favors any one driver ahead of another. I think the favorite of the guys I named this weekend is probably Matt Kenseth. He led the most laps in the race at Richmond earlier this year and won, I think, one of the stages as well. So Matt Kenseth, who's also been running well, finished 6th at Darlington this last weekend. He's riding, I think he's 6 out of the last 7 races. He's at a top 10. He's been pretty good lately. JGR, like I said, has been up and coming. So assuming these penalties don't hurt that team as a whole too much, I think Matt Kenseth might be the race favorite for Richmond. But honestly, it feels like the type of race where Clint Bowyer, if he has a good car, could contend. Joey Logano could contend. Eric Jones definitely, I think, is a major dark horse to keep an eye out on. And then obviously Chase Elliott and Jamie McMurray. When we think Chase Elliott, he's been strong at the big tracks like Michigan. He's been well known that he's had a lot of good career finishes there. I don't necessarily think short track when I think of Chase Elliott and success, but Richmond it's a 3/4 mile track. It's not Bristol. It's not Martinsville. You can race different ways there. I think Chase Elliott, I expect good things from him. Same with Jamie McMurray. Now, I've said for the last few weeks now that I thought the points were not really going to change. I think it's still going to be Chase Elliott, Matt Kenseth, and Jamie McMurray rounding out the top 16. I don't see Logano, Bowyer, and although Jones has been running well, I think it's, kind of a long shot pick. I wouldn't say Jones is the favorite to win this weekend. He might contend, though. I still think it's just going to be McMurray, Kenseth, and Elliott grabbing those final 3 spots. So I don't expect any major shakeups, but hey, it's a short track at Richmond. We've seen in the last few years, we've seen some pretty big shakeups potentially in this final race. We've seen people caught up in wrecks because it is a short track. Wrecks happen that aren't usually your fault. It's not quite Daytona/Talladega level of random, but sometimes you do find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time. Richmond is one of my favorite racetracks, and I remember this race last year was one of my favorite races of the season, so I'm very excited to see how the regular season ends, how this race goes, and maybe we do have a wild winner. Maybe Matt DiBenedetto does win this race by some miracle. And the way NASCAR's got their point system, that could very well completely shake things up. So anyway, I've given you my predictions, I've given you the gist of the situation. What do you guys think? You can leave comments. Discuss in the comments below. Who do you think is going to make it in? Do you think one of these drivers like Eric Jones, like Joey Logano, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to come out of nowhere and win this race and shake everything up? Do you think that Kenseth might win it because he could be the favorite? Do you think Truex is just going to dominate again and win all the stages and win another race and have like 1 million bonus points heading into the playoffs? What do you guys think? Let me know. If I am going to make a pick for Richmond, I'm going to go ahead and go with Matt Kenseth. Some people have been giving me grief because I've been picking so many Toyotas lately. In fact, I think if I pick Kenseth this week, that's 3 straight races now I've picked Toyota as well. I'll let you guys know I'm 2 for 2. I picked Kyle Busch to win Bristol, got that one. I picked Hamlin last week. Sure, it was encumbered, but he did win the race. I'm picking Kenseth this week. I'm going to try and go a perfect 3 for 3. I can't help it. The Toyotas have been really good. But anyway, guys, yeah, that is my show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this series so far. We're basically done with the regular season. I don't know how many episodes I've done now, 28, 29 episodes. I'm not sure what number episode this is, but that's a lot of episodes. The playoffs are about to start. In fact, our next episode will be talking about the playoffs because at that point, the playoffs will be getting set to begin. So I'm really excited for these next, 11 weeks. I guess we have about 11 more episodes remaining. It's been a lot of fun doing these very regular season. I hope you guys look forward to what we talk about in the playoffs. I hope the playoffs live up to the hype. They have the last few years. The playoffs have been pretty great. I'm hoping this year does as well. So thank you guys for watching. You can follow me on Twitter. Hit all those links down below as you wish. that's all I really have to talk about. Thank you for all the support, guys. Really means a lot. And I'll see you next Thursday. Have a great weekend.